Hi, Mark. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Look forward to this chat.
I am very much looking forward to this chat. I suppose you and I have known each other for a little while. Just to give our audience a bit of brief background, you actually invested in a company that I founded a number of years ago, and that's how we got to know each other. I actually came out and spent a bit of time with you in Malta, which was
Fantastic meal.
lovely. Yeah, we went for a fantastic meal, we did. And Mark, you have a fairly unique background, I would say, in our industry, given the breadth and depth of your experience and the things that you have done and still continue to do, which is why I'm so pleased to have you on the show today. And I'm sure this is going to be an interesting conversation for our listeners. I certainly want to talk to you about current issues in the PRS and your thoughts on things like that. But for some of our listeners who perhaps aren't aware of you, and I'm sure once you start speaking, they will very quickly become aware of who you are and probably do know of you, but could you give us a bit of a summary on what you're currently doing now, but also how you've ended up here? Because your story is particularly interesting, Mark.
Yeah, well, 36 years in the business in property finance, tax and law. Started in insurance in 87, went over to commercial lending in 89, worked at Citibank for a little while, then founded a business, a commercial finance brokerage from my back bedroom. By 2003, that helped me achieve my financial independence when it became a PLC, largest commercial finance brokerage in the world. I also formed the National Association of Commercial Finance Brokers. I was one of the founders of that in 92. So that's gone on to do quite well as well. That was purely not-for-profit exercises. 2016, I became location independent. So I've now got homes in Eastern Europe. My main home is in Portugal. It was in Malta, but I've recently moved to Portugal. I also have a home in the UK. It was let for a little while when I went away, but I've kept it now as a sort of holiday home. Kind of a holiday home in reverse, a holiday home in the UK when I live abroad. And then I've got another one in Florida. So I sort of spend my time between all of those. So yes, I'm also the founder of a business called Property 118, which was never intended to be a business. When I exited the commercial finance brokerage in 2009, I got bored. I thought I was going to retire, and I was like 41 years old. And I thought about writing a book, and I got to chapter 1.5 and thought, bloody hell, this is boring. And somebody suggested I did a blog because I'd then had the engagement. And within a couple of years, Google picked it up, Google Newsfeed, and it is grown to have about 24 million unique user sessions a year. So it's become quite a big thing at property118.com. And we built the tax planning business off of the back of that. So essentially Property 118 has become the window, the shop window, if you like. We've got several news people, editors, video people that do stuff for us. And it's been a roaring success. So I'm in the twilight years of my career, but totally love it.
Oh, you certainly look like you're loving it all. You look very well, sort of sun-kissed there, Mark, as well. I'm sure that all this time in sort of nice places, it will do that to you. I mean, it's an exceptional CV. I'm sure most people, if not all, will be aware of Property 118. I'm a regular user of Property 118. I enjoy the conversation on there. I enjoy contributing to conversations. And what I really love about Property 118 actually is that it's a platform created for landlords and investors by landlords and investors. And there isn't another agenda. There was never an agenda. It was just a great place to keep up to date with current issues, to connect with people who are doing all sorts of things in our industry. And I just found it an incredible resource and still continue to do so. And I find it so interesting that this was never intentional, because it's difficult to look at Property 118 and think, God, this is an amazing idea that someone had, and they, how great to have sort of known or sort of had the insight to think that this is something that would get 24 million eyeballs every year. And
it was a big mistake to start off with. So I'd done pretty well for myself by the time I'd set up Property 118. And of course, when you've got a bit of money in the bank account, it starts to burn holes in your pockets. And within the first year, I put nearly £1 million into making it the best blog I could possibly make. And my wife said to me, whoa, hang on a second, we're going to run out of money if you start doing this. And you've done well, but this is getting a little bit crazy. You're not monetizing this in any way, shape or form. So you really put the brakes on me. But obviously what we've done now is we've reinvested. We worked on donations to start off with. We still get the occasional donations, but we don't have any sort of paid premium memberships on the platform or anything like that. We do have quite a few affiliate type deals, But the main business is the legal business through our joint venture, which occurred a few years ago with Cotswold Barristers.
I mean, and that has become now, with everything going on, and we're going to talk about tax and, as one of these current issues in the PRS, but it has, for almost every single landlord, it has become a priority now because, as we know, we're getting squeezed more and more, and awareness of our tax implications and methods of legally reducing our tax bill has never been more important. And it seems to be that you kind of just caught the crest of the wave at the right time. And actually, and I think you've been quite modest, Mark, you have in many ways pioneered some of this stuff, including what we're going to talk about with regards to tax and some of the incorporation stuff that you've sort of very much led from the front. But before we get there, just remind us about when you took on, was it you basically took the mortgage companies to court?
Yeah. So there was a few mortgage companies playing silly games. When interest rates were really, really low at 0.1%, they obviously couldn't make a return for savers. And there were about 1 million people who had outstanding lifetime tracker rate mortgages, say 2 over base. So they were paying 2.01%. And that wasn't a big enough return for this one particular building society, the West Bromwich Mortgage Company, which is a subsidiary of West Brom Building Society. And they decided that if they can't increase the base rate, they'll increase the margin on the tracker rate. We said, you can't do that. And they said, well, take us to the Ombudsman then. And we lost to the Ombudsman, and we lost to the High Court. But we were like a dog with a bone. We couldn't let this go. So we crowdfunded and raised £650,000. Took this to the Court of Appeal, got the three of the top judges in the country heard the case. And we won. And we won 100% of costs. So every single person that had contributed to the crowdfund got their money back. And we also recovered £27.5 million worth of overpaid mortgage interest. And we created a really unique piece of case law, which was fantastic because most borrowers don't realise. In old contracts, it used to say that the mortgage lender could call in your mortgage within 30 days, even though you had a 25-year mortgage. And that's what West Brom were threatening. If you win this case, it'll be, a pointless victory because we'll just call in all the mortgages. So we took that to the Court of Appeal as well, and they ruled that they couldn't enforce that condition unless the mortgage was in default. And of course, we'd advised all of the people that we were representing in that representative action group, stick with where you are, keep paying the mortgages because we don't want you to go in default and give them an excuse. Anyway, we won that as well. So that's been a real saviour for a lot of landlords, not just the 6,200 that benefited from that win directly, but indirectly, it was 1 million others as well. So, and that was actually where we met Cotswold Barristers. Cotswold Barristers were the people that took on that class action. And for anybody who's ever watched that Julia Roberts film, what's it called, where she did the class action? Can you remember the one?
Erin Brockovich.
Erin Brockovich, that's the name of the film. Well, I'm the ugly male version of Erin Brockovich. Because it was the biggest direct public access class action case in the UK, and still is. And we won it, so that kind of put us on the map a lot better. And we won the Property Investors Awards only ever Lifetime Achievers Award for that, so we were very proud of that. And then, of course, straight after that, we had the summer 2015 budget when George Osborne announced Section 24, the restrictions on finance cost relief, and the people that really understood it came to us, the early adopters, find a solution. But I think that has been the catalyst for landlords to think harder about their tax, not just their income tax and the effects of Section 24, but tax generally. So, Section 24 hurts people. It didn't hurt them that much when interest rates were low, but it sure as hell is hurting now. Now you're paying the 6, 7, 8% mortgage rates, and you can't claim any of that finance cost back. That's hurting people. But they're also thinking, well, I might sell some of my properties, pay down my mortgages, and have an unencumbered or no exposed portfolio. So they start thinking about capital gains tax. And there's a lot of landlords out there that are my sort of age, in their twilight years of their career, thinking to themselves, well, actually, you start to think about your mortality. When you get into your 50s and 60s, people start dying around you, and you start to think about things a little bit more. So inheritance tax is obviously a bigger issue. So, in actual order of taxes that you will pay if you don't do any planning, the most tax you'll ever pay is your inheritance tax bill if you're a successful landlord. Then it's capital gains, then it's income tax. But it's the income tax changes that have made landlords think more holistically about taxation rather than sort of burying their head in the sand and thinking, oh, well, look after me for today sort of thing. They're looking at longer term planning.
That's right. And you have, for a long, long time, been cautioning the issue that this will be for landlords as interest rates inevitably start to go up. And of course, they stayed pretty flat for longer than any of us really expected. But of course, it has now happened and people are really feeling that. And having resources out there like you guys, and I mean, I've started looking myself. I know a number of people like yourself, Mark, as well, who have built good, substantial portfolios, looking at what they do with their wealth. And, you know, with some of them who've got 20, 30 properties in their personal names, you know, on many occasions, they're looking at huge tax bills. And, you know, the question is, how do I actually reduce this? How do I make sense of all of this?
What's really interesting these days is we've started to notice that lenders are talking to their existing portfolio clients that have been around for a long time and built their portfolios in their own names. They're starting to talk about incorporation. So Paragon did a survey and incorporation was one of the things in it. And then we heard last week that Paragon, if somebody's looking for more than 2 million exposure of lending, then it's one of the questions that might well fall into their interview process that they take on as an extra level of due diligence. The likes of Shawbrook Bank and Aldermore are talking to their clients about incorporation. So are Handelsbanken. So some of the bigger, more well-known commercial type lenders that look after larger portfolios are starting to ask the question now. And we think that's down to their credit risk, because if a business can be more tax efficient, it's less likely to default on its mortgage interest. So yeah, absolutely. But it's kind of the two markets as well. There's the people like me that started in the 80s, 90s, 2000s and bought everything in our own name. But there's also the people that are starting today. And the people that are starting today, you know, we talk to a lot of the bigger mortgage brokers like Mortgages for Business, etc. And they will tell us that 75 to 85% of their new mortgage applications are in the name of limited companies. And the statistics of Companies House reflect this. There was over 50,000 limited companies formed last year with the SIC code 68209. So we know they were formed for buy-to-let purposes. And this is a crazy statistic. Less than 0.1% have changed their articles of association, don't have a shareholders agreement, have a single class of shares. So we know that those businesses haven't been optimized. But the wiser people are coming to us and saying, look, I'm looking to set up a limited company. I know I could do it on my own with £12.99 on the internet. But I've seen you talking about family investment companies. I've read a bit about it. And for anybody who doesn't know what it is, if you use ChatGPT, you can have a wonderful conversation about family investment companies with ChatGPT. You can find out some stuff, but it'll obviously be sales pitches if you search you do your Google search or whatever. But have a great chat with ChatGPT. Just ask it what is a family investment company in the UK, and then just start asking it questions. And you'll find out loads of information, and it's pretty accurate. What it will say in ChatGPT is when you actually come to implement anything, make sure you take professional advice, and that's when we would talk to people. But if you get that structure right, you know, $12.99 company is optimized for the tax man. If you want a company that's optimized for yourself, realistically, it's going to cost you about £15,000 to look after your estate planning, improve your capital gains tax position, and so on. But when you think about the hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of pounds that your kids could be paying in inheritance tax, if you build a successful property investment portfolio, it's a tiny, tiny fraction of that cost to get it right in the first place.
So for anybody who is building up their portfolio now, Mark, they're buying it through a limited company, or that's how they're proposing to do it. At this point, now that they're aware that there are more tax considerations than perhaps just putting it into, let's call it an SPV, a limited company, what would be a good jump-off point for them? Where should they go? What kind of things do they need to be thinking about? What, broadly speaking, ideas are there or solutions potentially available to them to help them actually reduce longer-term tax bills?
It's a great question. Let's look at history to answer that question for us. So in the 70 years the Queen sat on the throne, property increased 128-fold. So basically, if you bought a property when she first got the crown, then let's say it cost £1,000. Today, that property would cost £128,000. Now, fast forward to today, let's assume the history repeats itself. So you're 30 years old, you're buying your first investment property, let's say you're paying £200,000 for it. It's not an average property, it's a sort of bottom end of the market type property. And I know that that's going to fluctuate depending on where you are in the country, but we'll just use 200 grand as an example. What if it doubles in value? You've just added another £200,000 to your estate. £200,000 addition to your estate, taxed at 40% inheritance tax. That's another £80,000 you give into the government. I'm not going to do the calculation if it goes up 128-fold because it's mind-blowing. It's like telephone numbers. But even if it only goes up 10-fold during your lifetime, which is only 1/7 of what happened during the Queen's reign, then that £200,000 property all of a sudden is worth £2 million. Even if you've only bought one, do you really want to be giving £800,000 to the taxman on your death? Do your kids really want to be worried about how they're going to find that £800,000 having just lost a parent? That's only if you buy one. But if you buy 10 properties, or 20 or 30, or as I did at my peak, 128, then you can see how those numbers get very, very scary. And the last thing you want to leave to your kids when they're grieving your loss is a huge, great big tax bill. And of course, the deal is they can't get their hands on your estate. Probate won't be granted until you've paid that tax bill. So it's a bit chicken and egg as well. They can't sell the properties to pay the tax bill. They've got to find some sort of bridging finance or whatever to do it. And it gets very, very messy. So, for anybody if they're starting out today or if they're a seasoned investor and they're buying a property today, at least get it right as of today. There's that old saying is that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Or the best time to form a family investment company was 20 years ago. Second best time is you get it. Yeah. So I look at it like building the foundations of a house. Nobody sees it, but if you don't put the foundations in, you're going to have problems down the line. You're going to start having cracks, and the house is going to start subsiding, and you're going to have big problems. The family investment company is the foundations for your business, for your legacy, for many, many generations to come. So I would say that is the starting point.
And when we talk about a family investment company, are we talking about trusts or group structures? What sort of things are we actually talking about, Mark?
Okay, so the idea of a family investment company, and be careful here because there's a lot of people that say that they do family investment companies and they don't. The first part of it is what's called alphabet shares. So when you get a company off the shelf, you'll have one class of ordinary shares, and those ordinary shares will have all of the potential rights assigned to them. So voting rights, dividend rights, and capital growth rights. What you can do is have multiple classes of shares, and this is what's called an alphabet share company, which is different, but it's part of. So I'm going to build up what a family investment company is. So you might have A shares, B shares, C shares, we'll say all the way down to Q shares, just for the sake of simplicity, because that's what our brochure says. Which you can download for free, by the way, but we'll talk about that later. So, in your A and B shares, that might be Mr. and Mrs., and they might want all of the voting rights because they're running the business. They obviously want to have dividend rights, but they don't necessarily want the capital growth. The capital growth can sit somewhere else. And then C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P might all be created as shares worth virtually nothing, but have no dividend rights. Sorry, to have dividend rights, but no voting rights, and again, no capital rights. So you could have a class of shares worth £1, and you could keep those, and then when you gift them to your children or your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren, you can then declare dividends and utilise their lower rate tax bands, their £2,000 a year dividend tax exemptions, etc. That's a great way of helping your kids get on the property ladder, pay for their school fees, or certainly their higher education, school fees for grandchildren, etc., etc. So that's the starting point. Now, the growth has to go somewhere. So what we tend to have is a class of shares that is the opposite. So it has no voting rights and dividend rights, but it has all the capital rights. Now, theoretically, you can just give those to your children. So when you die, all of the growth in your estate is not taxed, but when your kids die, it would be. So that's one way of doing it. And if you know that your kids are never going to have children, then that might be the way to go. But most people hope that their family tree will sort of extend a little bit, and that there will be great-grandchildren and so on. So what you can do there is you could create something called a discretionary trust, and you could put all of those growth shares in the discretionary trust. And then this is where it stops being an alphabet share company. So alphabet shares allow you to allocate dividends. When it becomes a family investment company, that's when you start splitting out the rights in these share classes. And you have some shares that are frozen in value and other share classes that grow. And those share classes that grow sit in the discretionary trust, which is outside everybody's estates. The final piece of the jigsaw that deals with a piece of legislation called the settlements legislation, a very important legal document, is the shareholders' agreement. And what the shareholders' agreement does is it says that the value of the growth shares will only crystallise upon the sale, liquidation or winding up of the company. So if that does not happen, that discretionary trust just sits there with a nominal value. And you have a letter of wishes to all your trustees that says, please don't ever sell, liquidate or wind up the company. And the benefit of that is if you had a load of money in the discretionary trust, you'd have to pay a 6% anniversary charge every 10 years. Well, if that business hasn't been sold, liquidated or wound up, that discretionary trust isn't worth anything, and therefore the 6% tax is only on the £10 that's attached to the discretionary trust and the pounds worth of shares that you've put into it. So it's 6p worth of tax. So it's all about getting the structure right. You have to change the articles of association, you have to do a shareholders agreement, you have to make sure that everything's filed properly at Companies House, that you have the right minute. But if it's done properly, you can protect. You can not only do your tax planning now for your kids and your future and the grandkids, you can make sure that the inheritance tax gets booted down the road almost indefinitely. There is a limit on it. So in 125 years' time, somebody's going to have to pay the inheritance tax. But we're not going to know then.
I mean, it's fascinating stuff. And I think also, understandably, for your average investor, like, for example, me, many of our listeners, who is primarily focusing on how to actually build their portfolio, I think it's okay and reasonable for us to feel like, God, this sounds really bloody complicated and a bit scary. But of course, with the right people who know what they're doing, like most things, actually, I'm sure that it is a fairly straightforward process, and there are certain things that you just need to make sure that you do to get it all into place. And actually, I've started this process myself, Mark, which brings me on to my next question, because I'm sure there are a lot of people listening today thinking, well, okay, that's all well and good. It sounds like it's probably going to be quite expensive and it take a lot of time and brain power. And at the minute, I just need to focus on buying some properties. So for those people who have maybe done that, got started, have built a small portfolio, but have longer term plans, let's say, to 10x the size of that portfolio, this can all be done in retrospect, I assume.
To an extent. So what we can do is we look at it as it's a bit like stopping the bleeding. So if you build your house without the foundations, you can underpin it later, but it's still not a good idea. The best time to do it is before you start building the portfolio. What we can't do is turn the clocks back. So if you've already made £1 million worth of gain in your estate, that's still going to be taxed for inheritance tax. We can stop any future growth accruing to your estate. So yeah, if you haven't done it, then and you might have a problem. Well, as long as you're not going to die today or tomorrow and you think that capital values are going to increase, you need to do that underpinning today, essentially, to use that underpinning analogy.
It's a fascinating conversation. I found this stuff quite interesting, actually, as the idea of longer term wealth becomes increasingly more important than I would, if I was honest, say that the shorter term sort of gains from things like cash flow and recycling capital to buy the next one have been over the last 10, 15 years for me. And at the end of today's episode, we'll have a chat about exactly where our listeners can come and get this advice from, which clearly we need to talk to the experts. I mean, just off the top of my head, I've got a number of clients that have come to me recently, and they have very successfully built and sold their businesses. They're now taking a lot of their wealth that they've crystallized, putting it into property. They're buying quite aggressively into primarily HMOs. And this would be obviously a great time for people like that to seriously think about getting this sort of structure set up.
Sure. Can I just make a point on that as well? So the initial advice, we had a consultation process. It lasts for a number of days. There's obviously a lot of exchanges in terms of gathering information before we present a solution to you. But it comes with a total satisfaction money-back guarantee. We're the only consultancy business that we know of in this space that offers that guarantee. So if you're not happy, it doesn't cost you a penny. You just tell us why you're not happy. We'll give you your money back. We're not going to argue with you. There's no quibble. We'll just give you your money back. So yeah, I think that's a pretty unique offering and should be mentioned.
I mean, you can't say fairer than that, Mark, and I completely agree. And Mark, something that really stands out to me when I talk to you and look at what you've done and have achieved over the years is you clearly had the opportunity to just put your feet up, enjoy the house in Florida, but you have very much gone out of your way to help other people to try and better the PRS and the environment for investors. The obvious question that really stands out to me is why? What is it that drives you and has driven you to do things like take the mortgage companies to court, to build something like Property 118, which is an absolute behemoth? I mean, it's so far beyond the blog, really. It's kind of difficult to really comprehend, I'm sure, what exactly happens behind the scenes there now at Property 118. It is that vast. And setting up services like this, pioneering services and things like this, which you guys have very much done. You've been right at the forefront of it since 2015, and I've watched you do this and test it and get it off the ground. What has driven you? What is driving you to do all of this, Mark?
I think a lot of, as any psychologist will say, you're shaped by your childhood. And I come from a Salvation Army family. Roots go right back to William Bramwell, the founder of the Salvation Army in our family. And I guess my grandparents, my parents, quite religious people. I'm not particularly, by the way, but they are quite religious people. And they are very giving people. So, I've heard stories of my great-granddad with his horse and cart. He was a scrap metal dealer. And he also had another horse and cart that sold fruit and veg. And he would allow people just to, put everything on the tab if they were a bit skint, and he'd just write it off. And I remember when Nan baking cakes for the Salvation Army, it's still into her 70s, and she was baking cakes for the over 60s. And I thought, okay, yeah, fair enough. I think we've come from a very, very giving family, and I think that has impacted. But I genuinely believe that if you're giving, you're learning, you're receiving, you're exposing yourself to different types of people in all walks of life, and there's going to be good and bad. I just think only good things come from sharing. That old adage that is so worn out now, sharing is caring. But I genuinely, passionately believe in that. So if you look at the West Brom case, yes, I had a West Brom mortgage. It was a £73,000 mortgage. I had to raise 650 grand to fight the case. It took me 2.5 years. I didn't earn a penny from it. Some people would say, well, it's a bit of stupidity as well. But, as I said, it's about giving. Things do come back. It put us on the map. It got us that award. More people learned about Property 118. It introduced us to the barristers' chambers that we're now partnering with. That we're able to build the tax team out of. So we now have 6 barristers and 11 tax consultants. None of that would have happened if I hadn't have taken on that case against West Brom, because I would have never met Mark Smith at Cotswold Barristers. So, yeah, that's my philosophy. I don't know whether that's right. It's just my answer to that question today.
I mean, your story is so unique. And actually, I think you're very modest, Mark, in many ways. And that gratitude and that you invested in my company, not because you were ever going to get, a huge return, that, it was not that sort of venture. But you did it because you liked the idea and you wanted to support and help me. And I remember getting a message from you privately of just encouragement and sort of, which actually at that time we did a big crowdfunding raise and very much in uncharted territory for me.
I remember when you did it. Previously, I'd only come across bad news in the rent-to-rent market. And I thought, I watched your video with your, I don't know, this Cedars or one of those crowdfunding type campaigns. You had a little video on there. I thought, I don't know these guys. They're younger guys, sort of the same age as our kids. And I thought, if anybody's going to get this right, it's you guys. And it didn't quite go to plan, but I'll tell you what, you made a lot of people think, and that's why I put the money in. It wasn't about making a fantastic return. It was just that I thought, you guys are doing it right, and I'm going to put some money behind that to help you educate other people how to do it right.
Yeah, and we were incredibly grateful for that. I guess the next question I've got then, Mark, is, and you might have to park some of your modesty for a moment, but this success, it's rare that we get someone on the show that's built a portfolio of over 100 properties. It's rare that we get someone on the show that's built and scaled up a property company and sort of taken it public. And it's rare that we get someone who in their twilight years has gone on and built, a platform that gets 24 million unique views. There's got to be something in there that you can, I suppose, pinpoint, how this success has come about. What is it? What have you done? What has in some way been unique about this? Has it been just your perseverance, your consistency? Is it relationships? What is it that has allowed you, not just on one occasion, but on multiple occasions, to achieve incredible results like the ones you have?
I think it's all of those things, and I can't credit it to any one thing. Perhaps if I did, it would be passion. So, if we take a footballer, I love him or hate him, David Beckham's probably the one that most people know. I'm not into football at all, by the way, but I could bet that he's passionate about what he does. So for him, playing football wasn't, he didn't see it as a chore. Getting up and doing the training in the mornings, he was probably passionate about that. He was probably passionate about the amount of effort that he had to put in to not just playing on the pitch, but being the person he is off the pitch, in PR, in the media highlight, spotlight, and all of that sort of thing. So it didn't feel like work to him. Probably still doesn't. And he became successful because he was good at what he did. Now, did I go on any specific training or courses or anything like that? No, I just followed what I believed was right. I think I had a strong ethical compass. That's why I took on that big fight against the West Brom. It was simply wrong. And I had no idea how good things would come out as a result of it. But I focused on it. And I knew it was wrong. And I proved that to be the case. When I've taken on people to work with me, I never take on people to work for me. Know the word. They work with me. When I do that, we have to have a shared goal. We are an open book. They share everything with me. I share everything with them. They see my bank balance. The only thing I can give them is my PIN number. But everything else is a complete transparent relationship. And we work on each other's goals. And I think that's really important because you can't achieve everything in life yourself. So I credit a lot of what I've achieved to the relationship I've got with my team. If my team hadn't achieved their personal goals, then I wouldn't have achieved any of mine either. So we did them together.
Well, I share all of those sentiments, Mark. And it's nice to hear someone like yourself who has achieved so much just remind us of that, because I think often it's very easy, particularly with social media now, to forget that actually those are the things that are really quite important and will help us get to where we are. It's not just about being incredibly good at finding the best deal or getting the best discount that you can. Actually, long-term success, particularly in this game that we work in, property, which is slow, is about a number of things. And I've said it myself and experienced it myself, but often about the people around us, and just having the right attitude, like you said, a good passion for what you're doing. And what I think one of the things that has helped me get where I am is a genuine sort of enjoyment for what I do. I get up and it never feels like work. This is theoretically work. I'm sat, but it's beautiful outside. It's I think went Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday morning, recording this podcast, and it doesn't feel like work. And it's taken a certain amount of commitment and dedication to be able to sit here and have these conversations with people like you. But I've always tried to just enjoy as much as I possibly can about doing it.
Yeah, I think the other key word I would use as well is relationships. You're going to go through life and you're going to kiss a lot of frogs to find your prince. I think it's the same in business. You are going to form relationships with some people who will abuse that relationship, and you need to work out how to get out of it without them bad-mouthing you and causing you problems and so on and so forth. So it's how to get into quality relationships, how to get out of bad ones without causing further damage to that person, your business, or yourself. So I think that's been a key thing as well.
I couldn't agree more. Mark, there's one thing that is sort of left on my list that I want to discuss with you today, and it's the current issues in the property market, the PRS at the moment. Obviously, these are fairly uncharted territory, uncharted waters for anyone who's been investing, let's say, less than 10 years. What's happening right now is a bit concerning, and a lot of people are scrabbling about trying to figure out how to make this work. We've talked about tax and the impacts that tax can have, more so about the long-term stuff, but interest rates is having a very significant short-term effect on people's cash flow as well. We've got changes in legislation pending, like the Renters Reform Bill. You've been through the mill a few times now,
Right.
And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on what the PRS, what the property market, not necessarily with regards to prices or values or anything like that, but as an investment vehicle, how it's looking compared to other things at the minute. Is property still what it used to be? Are you still encouraging people to invest in property? Tell us what you think about what's going on at the minute and where you see things going.
Okay, so there's been 3 times during my life where my cash flow has been really hard hit, and I've hung in there. I might have had to juggle a few things. What I'm doing and what I would encourage others to do will depend on their age. So I said I peaked at 128 properties. I'm now down to 11. I'm completely unmortgaged across all my personal and buy-to-let properties. And that's because simply it was part of my exit plan. But I'm not telling everybody to sell all their buy-to-let properties for sure. Buying property, well, Donald Trump, love him or hate him, he came up with a wonderful phrase, don't wait to buy property and wait. I still think that's absolutely right. I still think if we're still around in 70 years' time, you probably might be. I don't start wishing a chancel too old for that. But for those of the youngsters that are still around in 30, 40, 50 years' time, they're going to go, I wish I'd have bought a property in 2023, 2024. There was a crash. There was some people that were really panicking to sell. There was a market. I know interest rates were high. I go back to when I started in 1989. Within 2 years, I'd lost 30% of the value of my first property. And interest rates, I was actually on a pay rate of 18%. It was bloody hard. I could have posted the keys through the letterbox, but I didn't. And I've still got that same property. That's one of the 11. I just cannot bring myself to sell. So, yeah, I still think it's a great time. There isn't a bad time to get into property. When people are panicking, that's when there are bargains to be had. I know there's very limited inventory on the market these days. People are worried about the high interest rates. Listen, if you've got negative cash flow and it's a massive problem, then look at the tax position, because we get a lot of people that are saying, I bought ages ago, I bought at 75, even 85, even 100% LTV in the days of no money down. But my LTV is now 40, 50%. I bought all regular buy-to-lets, didn't have any HMOs, which are giving me better returns and whatever. What should I do? I'm thinking of selling some properties. And we look at the ones that are looking to sell and we go, well, look at the capital gains tax that you have to pay. And that kind of puts them off a bit. And that's when they need a tax planning solution. So, reversing a whole, if you've got a property business that is genuinely a business, you're spending at least 20 hours a week running your property business, then there are reliefs to enable you to sell that business to your own limited company in return for shares. You sell it at market value, the capital gain rolls into the shares, so there's no capital gains tax. There are also reliefs for stamp duty in certain circumstances. Once you've made that transition, you've rebased the purchase price. So if the company sells the properties the day after, it's not made a gain. So it doesn't pay any capital gains tax. The capital gain sits in the shares and you're not selling them. So where we get people in that situation and they say, I want to sell half my properties and I want to pay off all my mortgages, we'll say, well, fine, go through the incorporation route and then do it, then do your restructure. because all of the money from the sale proceeds that you get can be paid off your mortgages without exposing yourself to that capital gains tax. And interest rates have sort of skyrocketed over the last 2 years. We are getting busier and busier and busier with people that are sort of sat on the fence, not knowing whether to look at incorporation or not, burying their head in the sand. Oh, it's low interest rates, it's not affected us that badly, we'll just pay the tax, going, oh my God, I'm into negative cash flow and I've still got this great big tax bill to pay, help. And these are the kind of solutions that we put into place for them through our tax team. I'm not a practicing tax consultant, by the way, I just run the team.
Well, listening to your years of experience and you sort of share your thoughts on that with some perspective is actually quite reassuring, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will agree. And again, a good reminder that if you are going to do it, you've got to do it right. We've got to be professional investors, haven't we? That means treating tax professionally as well. Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I'm sure we could continue chatting for hours. Might have to see whether or not I can pop out for another little trip to see you this time, perhaps in Portugal.
We're a bit closer now. We're only 2.5 hours away.
But thank you so much for coming on the show. Look, I'm going to encourage all of our listeners, if there's any of you who haven't yet had a look at Property 118 and all of the fantastic resources on there, please do go and have a look. It really is a brilliant resource. And of course, for any of you listening that think actually, now is the time to get some proper advice on your tax position, drop me and the team an email at info@thehmoroadmap.co.uk. Tell us that you want to speak to Mark and the team about tax planning and things like that, and we will make sure that we put you in contact with them so that you can start the ball rolling. But Mark, thank you once again. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Great interview. Well done you as well. I'd like really
Thank you, Mark.
It.
Well, I think what we'll do is we'll put a little placeholder in for maybe a year's time, and it'd be good to sort of see where we're at in the property market, what's changed. No doubt you will be right at the forefront of whatever it is. So I'm already very much looking forward to that as well.
Big thumbs up to that one.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks again. Cheers.